Hello, creatures. Welcome to Halloween month. It's October, and I felt it only appropriate that for the month of October that I would be doing horror sound design. Creepy sound design, scary sound design, spooky scary sound design. For the month of October, I will be doing a number of scary sound design videos using various plugins and methods. Now, before I get too deep into this, I do want to say that even though I will be using certain plugins, primarily things like Phase Plant, I don't want anyone to think that I'm requiring you to use what I have, because I shouldn't assume what you have. But I do want to at least get down to the fundamentals of the sounds that I'm going to be designing so that you could translate that into whatever you have. And because of that, I'm not going to be doing anything too terribly specific, but not too general either. These are some of the things that I think are effective for me when it comes to, scary sounds that you could use in your music. And I did talk a little bit about this in a previous video. And that's what I'm going to be showing you. So I guess without further ado, let's get into our first sound. The sound in this video that I'm making is an atonal atmosphere, and it sounds like this. Atmospheres, those are the sounds that help to put you in the mood, help put you in the feeling of whatever it is that you're listening to. It helps to reinforce the piece, the music. Not to be confused with ambient sounds, which I think there can be a bit of crossover. Atmospheres, I feel, are a bit more out there. They're not really meant to be a leading sound, so to speak. But whatever the meaning of an atmosphere or an ambient sound is when it comes to sound design, it doesn't matter. Let's just make the sound. I have Phase Plant open here. For this sound, there's basically two main parts. The first part is a bit more tonal, a bit more melodic, a bit more normal sounding, I guess, is a way to describe it. And then the second part is a lower pitched sound, and there's a bit more distortion going on there, is because there's a bit of FM in the sound. And to make this, I'm going to start with an analog generator, and for right now, I'm going to make it a sine wave. I'm also going to add a second analog generator, make that a sine wave, because I am going to add a little bit of FM from one of these into the next. So far, it sounds like this. Right, just some sine waves, nothing interesting. But for right now, let's mute this. I'm going to pitch this up. I don't want this to be at 1, 4. So now it's up here. This next one is going to modulate the first one, and I'm going to go from here because I want it to modulate from the envelope into here. So far it sounds like that, and it looks a little bit kind of like a cut-off pulse, cut-off triangle wave a little bit, and I'm going to bring the loudness down a little bit for both of them. And as I've shown, I disabled the output for the second one because I just want this to be the modulator for the first wave. All right, I'm going to drag this out because I want this to be slow, just like it was in the example. This one's also going to be a bit slow as well. But I want the modulation up just a little bit more. This is going to be pulled out to around, let's say, 3 seconds. Somewhere around there. Or 4 seconds. No, 3. Going to be longer too. Let's bring the gain down because it's quite a bit loud. Okay. So we have our first sound basically set up, and now let's go into the second one. For this next part of the sound, I'm going to add a few more analog generators, because of course I am. And I'm going to start with sine waves, and I might change this later, but right now I do want to hear the effect that they're going to have on one another. And this is before, before I actually finalize a sound. Whenever I set something like this up, I want to hear kind of what the effect that certain things have on one another, like modulation and so forth. I'm going to change the tuning to something lower than 1, because I don't want this C to be a normal C. All right, so that's there. It's a little bit high, higher than I want, maybe right there. I'm just experimenting with different tunings. And this is going to go into here just a little bit for right now, we're going to mute that. And you can kind of hear that distortion, the FM and sidebands in the sound a little bit. But this is kind of what I do when I set up a sound like this, is I want to sort of figure out the sweet spot for what's going to be an interesting sound. And I think for this, I want to go up a little bit around here. I kind of like that. Of course, I can modulate it more. Might be a little too much. So right around there. Leave it there for now. Now I'm going to add another one and tune it somewhere else. Now this one is actually also going to the output, but I could modulate this and have it go to the output. So that's interesting. It's almost like a ringing bowl, which is kind of a cool sound. Hear that? So instead I'm going to tune it to right around here, because I don't want this going to the output either, funnily enough. This is going to be long because I do want this to also be pad-like sound and have a slower attack and a very much longer release. Not that long either, around there. Envelope is going to come down, so the sustain is a bit quieter around here, which means that this is going to have to be long as well. The thing with modulating other waveforms with a waveform is that if you go from the envelope is going to control the amplitude of the sound. So if you have the release is short for this envelope, for instance, and the release for the carrier is long, then whatever the modulator is doing to the sound is going to decrease at the rate of that oscillator's release stage. You hear it slowly attack, and you hear how it just cut off because the release is so slow. So I don't want the release that slow. I want it kind of like that. I would like this, like that as well. Maybe the attack for this to be a bit slow. It's a really nice FM sound, but for right now, we are still just setting up the sound. Let's have one more. And this one is going to be interesting. I want this to be very, very low in pitch, somewhere around here. But I also want to try maybe doing something like this. Okay, and how this sound is going to affect the others, let's find out. I'm going to modulate it, going here, and going there. Okay. And that's the basic sound. But of course, we're not done because that just sounds weird, you know? And now this is where things get interesting. We don't want to leave it at just this sound. It's a bit basic, we can do a bit more. And we're going to do more down here in the modulators. So let's go open up the first sound again and add in something like an LFO, because I want to affect the pitch, except I don't want to use that as my LFO. I want to use something else. Maybe something that I can draw in as a custom shape, you know? Maybe this. Maybe something like this. Who knows? Bit of a weird shape. You know, something a little bit different than just a sine wave. You can, of course, use a sine wave and a triangle wave. Let's say you're making a sound like this and not in phase plant. You can use whatever you have available to you as your modulator. I'm going to have this modulate our sound right here. Mute that so I'm just listening to this. But you hear there's a little bit of weird ring modulation type of thing going on. That's because we're only modulating this sound at first. So I'm also going to add this to here at the same amount as the first sound. Or rather, not at the same amount, but at the same ratio amount or so. Okay, and so that is happening. And I can change the range here. So if I don't want it to modulate too much after I've already set the values here, I could just increase or decrease this. Okay. Kind of like that. But we can do even more with this, and I want to focus on the modulator now. What can we do with this? I think we can add an LFO, a different LFO, and that's going to also have a different shape as well. And it's going to have a different rate, and I'm going to have this modulate the amount, or rather, the sustain amount for this sound. So what's essentially going to happen is the amount in the envelope that's actually going to increase and decrease in loudness is going to affect how much it's modulating the carrier wave. So you can hear it very, very slightly, very subtly changing the brightness of the sound, while the other LFO is changing the pitch of both of them. Bring that down. But we're not actually done. I want to add a filter, and I'm going to do some stuff with the filter as well. The filter sounds like this. Let's add some Q, some resonance. And, very important thing, let's add note. And this is essentially how we key track here in phase plant. And I'm going to assign that to the cutoff at 100%, and then listen to where pitch is, like right around there. Yep, that's very loud. And so what I want to do now is add an envelope. So I want the filter to open up over time a little bit. But not that far. Increase the attack. Maybe match the attack to this envelope here. And now I'm going to add something else. Another curve, but I'm going to add some weird shapes. I'm going to go with something completely out there. Maybe waver. Maybe. And I'm going to change it so that it's not 100% like that. Okay. Slow it down. Let's not slow it down. Let's speed it up just a little bit. What I'm going to do here is now assign it to the cutoff so that it's actually going to have a little bit of a fluttering effect overall, and that will sound a bit like this. right? Just anything to add a bit more movement, a bit more modulation to the sound, something that takes it from being stale and basic into something a little bit more interesting. And so now I think for that sound, I'm going to leave it alone and now focus on the other sounds. We're going to bring those into full view. Open up, open up, open up, open up. And we're going to do the same thing to these. We're going to figure out what modulation we can add to this. So I have an LFO. Going to change the shape into something random. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to have either the volume, modulation, or anything that is going on between these sounds to change slightly over time. And what's going to happen is it's going to affect the timbre. It's going to affect the overall feel of the sound. I'm going to have this just very slightly affect the pitch of this one. Very slightly affect the pitch of this sound, just very slightly. And then the pitch of this sound as well. And you can hear it. It's very subtle. But you can kind of hear the sidebands are kind of going around each other as the pitch is changing. But something that I hear, I don't know if you hear, the level of FM, the level of overall distortion that you hear is pretty much the same. I want to change that. So I'm going to add a couple other LFOs, maybe actually an LFO table. Let's see what we've got here. Flow peaks, maybe, sure. We can do that. And I can do this. Maybe not that. That's a bit too much. Okay. I'm going to affect maybe the sustain of this. Let's see. Yeah, and you can kind of hear how it's now shifting, it's mutating, it's changing over time, just very slightly. But yeah. Add another LFO. We bring this here. We add that. Let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, so there are my modulators for the second part. I've also decided that I think it would be cool to have some of these sounds also go directly to the output, but have them be much quieter, because if I had this too loud, it would be like that, but I don't want that to be the case. Also, let's see if I can modulate a little bit more. Just to give, a little bit of irregularity and differences to the sounds. Even more. Now, at this point, even though we're mostly done, this is when I like to make fine-tuned adjustments to my sound before I go and put the effects in there, because even though the effects will contribute to the overall finished sound, I want to make sure that everything is just right even before then. So I'm going to unmute these and listen to everything. Like for instance, now that I'm hearing this, I don't think I want that to be as much, except now I have a new idea. This will affect this. Except it's going to be the other direction. And now I'm going to bring this down. I'm also going to bring that down. Extend that. And I think instead of that, I'm going to affect this instead. And change the pitch even more. Oh, I already have it changing pitch. Never mind. Okay, I think we're good. And now, let's add the effects. So, first, what I want to do is, I actually want to send these into a different lane, or rather this one, into a different lane. So if I send this into lane 1, then the rest of these are going to go into lane 2. So, all right, let's do that. So for this first sound, I'm going to add a dual delay because of the all the modulation going on in the filter. I think it would be interesting to have a bit of a delay, especially if it's at different times. We could change the amount of feedback, the amount of spread and crosstalk and stuff, mix. It almost sounds very whistly. Very creepy. Indeed. Okay. I like that so far. And now for this group, which I'm going to put through lane 2. And this one is going to go straight to lane 3. I think everything is going to go from these lanes into the last lane. What is outputting? Not this one, but this one. Yes. So we're going to go into lane 2 for these. I think I want to filter. I kind of want to control these peaks just a little bit because it can get a little bit loud. So for that, I think I'll just do filter like this, bring the gain down a bit around here. Yeah, maybe something like that. Okay, cool. Altogether, it sounds like this. Now, at this point, usually when I design a sound like this, I try to think, where else can I take this sound? What are the qualities that I hear here that I can either amplify or go, ooh, let's throw a wrench in it and make it totally weird and different? So I'm hearing a little bit of like pitch variance because I have the dual delay on the first sound. So it's almost like instead of a solo voice, it's kind of like a choir of voices. So what if I were to mess with the pitch even further and apply it to both the high pitch sound and the lower sound as well? Thankfully, Faceplant has something like that called Pitch Shifter right here. We're going to mess with that a little bit. A little bit much, I think. And this is actually something I really like too, because I could, if I wanted to, modulate that. Let's see what that sounds like. Right? And now we've got this weird sort of pitch shifting going on in the sound. And we can mix it in more, we can mix it in less. And it just adds another dimension of unease to this overall sound. So now, of course, I'm going to add a bit of reverb to give it a bit of space. Let's see. Increase the decay. Let's dampen it just a little bit. No, a little bit more than a little bit. How's it sound in the mix? We're around there. So, I've been playing mostly higher notes. Let's play lower. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the stuff right there. Right? And at this point, you could just mess with this, add in any more effects if you want. Like, let's say I add a bit of distortion to the first sound. That might be a bit much, actually. You might want to bring the gain down a little bit on that. We're going to have the distortion there. But it could work. Yeah, something like that. Now, if we want to take this even further, which of course we can change it so that instead of it just being like a pad, because it's pretty much like a pad right now, we just play a note, slow attack, it'll sustain, and then release. We can do things like add a macro to the volume of this, bring this down to 0. And bring the loudness up. So that if we want, we can have control over which element that we hear. It's the first one, or the second one rather. Bring the first one in. Yeah. Maybe we want to go back and forth. Maybe we want this to be something where we hear just the first sound or the second sound and not either of them at the same time. You know, we could do something like that. And that's the sound. That is our atonal atmosphere. There are a number of different ways for you to approach doing atmospheres, doing ambient type sounds, or anything that is going to fit in the background of your horror score. But this is just one of the approaches that I had, and one of the types of sounds that I wanted to show you how to make, because I think that relationship between a high-pitched sound and a low-pitched sound played together is interesting, especially when you want to get and try to branch out and do scary sounds. And so that's where I'll leave you with in today's video. Thank you for hanging out and watching. Let me know if you want this sound or any of the sounds that I make in these videos. I might make them available for download if you really want them. I can do that for you. And I'll see you in the next video, whenever that will be, probably Tuesday and Friday. I'll see you then. Bye. Happy Halloween.